I could not accept my sister as she was. I remember walking in my therapist's office the one day and she goes, "Can you just accept her as she is?" And I thought, no, like, are you crazy? Like, if I just let this happen, like, she's going to hurt herself just like my brother did. And then I won't have any siblings left.
Yeah.
And it took me, and I just thought it was such an absurd question at the time. I was just like, are you kidding me? There's no way I can accept her as she is. And it took me a few weeks only, actually. But that question kept rolling through my mind, just like on a reel. And I was just like, you know what? Like, I think I would feel so much better if I just said, like, she's maybe just going to be sick for a really long time and she's got to figure it out on her own. And hopefully someday she'll get there. But like, if something happens to her, I'm going to feel like shit, right? I mean, I'm going to feel like crap.
Yeah.
But I'm going to also know that I did what I could.
Yes.
And I feel strongly that I've done what I could. And so if something happens, I'm so hopeful that she finds sobriety, lasting sobriety, and is healthy and happy and can have a relationship with her kids. But if not, it's not something that's in my control.
Welcome back. We are on today with my guest, Melanie Moberg, on the 12 for Dish It podcast. I'm your host, Angie Sorensen. You can come and find me at angies.com. That's angie-s.com, or on my Linktree link, which is linktree/12 for Dish It. Both links are in the show notes, just like every week. Listen, that's the place you can go if you want to be part of my community, if you want me to show you how to create your own podcast and get involved with what I do. I'd love to see you there. So if you like the show, please give it a 5-star rating and review, and be sure to tell your friends. Subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, or wherever you are listening to right now. The more you do that, the more it helps new listeners discover this show. In today's episode with Melanie, we go over codependent relationships with and without substance abuse. What's the line between being there versus enabling them? And how do you know when you're in a toxic friendship? How do you know when it's unhealthy and that you should call it a day? And how do we do that? So you've probably guessed it. There's going to be a little content note. And this episode contains topics such as addiction and suicide. So discretion is advised. So without further ado, let's begin. Welcome, Melanie.
Welcome. Thank you.
No, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm really looking forward to this conversation with you because I've been wanting to talk about, friendships, and in particular, the toxic ones, also called the codependent ones, I think. And I also want to include, being friends with someone with addiction. So, yes. So before we dive in, please introduce yourself, where you live, and what you do.
So my name is Melanie Moberg, and I live in Minnesota, and I'm a codependency coach. So to explain that to people, because I think codependency is such an all-encompassing word, but I like to explain it that I like to help women who are feeling stressed, tired, anxious, and less than, and have been putting themselves last for years. I like to help these women transform into empowering themselves and living their best lives.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And you've also written a book around, can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I wrote a book called Warriors in Recovery. It's available on Amazon. It's a collection of 12 women's stories of addiction and recovery, very powerful, moving stories. And in between, I throw in some bits of wisdom that kind of tie the stories together, a little bit about self-love, codependency, mental health, all sorts of things. I have my graduate degree from Hazelden Betty Ford Graduate School of Addiction Studies. And so I studied mental health and addiction and how they relate to each other, and have a degree in addictions counseling, actually.
How did you get into this line of work? Before we dive in, there's often usually a reason behind people doing what they do. So I'm curious, can I ask you this?
Most definitely. Yes. So definitely did not choose this. It chose me. I have my undergraduate degree is actually in accounting, and I have my CPA license. So I'm an accountant. I used to be an accountant, really, which is so different from coaching.
Yeah.
And so obviously some things happened that shifted that, right? So my sister has struggled with addiction for many years, and it's been quite the journey. And I have one sister and one brother, and I lost my brother actually in 2013 to suicide while he was high on meth and drunk.
Okay.
And my sister, is still working towards recovery. So it's been quite the journey. I've had lots of people in my life outside of my family that are also struggling. And I had a really hard time understanding that side of addiction. And I know it's not necessarily a choice, and so many things were going into it, and I didn't understand their side of it. And so that's what prompted me to get my graduate degree. And originally I thought I wanted to be like a recovery coach. So helping people transition into like normal everyday life after coming out of a treatment center, and realized that I was resonating more so with the family members and the friends of people in recovery. And really found my voice in that space, and feel like I really have a lot to share as far as being someone that loves someone. And what does, addiction look like? What does enabling look like? And there's so much, addiction, it's not only the person struggling with addiction that struggles, it's everyone in their life that struggles.
Oh, yeah. It's like an enmeshment, not enmeshment, although when you're family, probably enmeshment maybe is the better term, but it's like an energy entanglement. You can't help but being affected by what's going on with them. And the thing is that for you, when it's your brother and sister, and your sister now, is that you can't just go, well, it's a bit harder to, we're going to go into that, I guess, like later, how you manage those relationships when you have someone close to you, whether it's a friend, a family member who has an addiction. Because it's a thing about, I find it hard to know whether staying friend with someone who has an addiction. I'm thinking of alcoholism. So I have a friend who, and there's other things going on with her, but I felt like more than half the time that I couldn't actually be there for that person because it was a constant fight. Let's go into like one level first. Let's go I feel like we need to go back a little bit and talk about like toxic friendships, without codependencies or substance abuse. And then from there, maybe we can build into addictions as well on top of it. Do you feel that would be a good way to get into it?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you. So, so I'm going to ask you, because you're obviously the person who knows about this. How would you define a codependent friendship, and what does it look like?
So I think a codependent friendship is oftentimes very one-sided, where somebody is really taking care of the other person. And so you'll find that in a lot of relationships where somebody, hasn't been able to take responsibility for themselves, where they have been sort of handheld and coddled. And a lot of times what it looks like in a friendship is somebody really taking all of your time, like, I need something, so they reach out to you, or they'll ask you to do things for them that they could do for themselves. And so oftentimes, you're only getting a phone call when they need you. It's not a back and forth sort of friendship where you can lean on them, but they're constantly leaning on you. And it becomes this really difficult pattern because, we may love that person, but it's, where do you draw the line? How do you communicate how you're feeling? And in friendships, that can be really tricky, especially if somebody's struggling, with mental health or addiction. But in a non-substance use situation, or outside of addiction, how are you feeling around that person is really the number one thing that will answer whether or not there's codependency involved. Do you feel self-conscious around them? Do you feel not good enough? Do you feel like no matter what you do, it's never enough?
Like a judge as well? Could you feel judged?
Yeah, I would say, yeah. I mean, it's, somebody that is really requiring so much of you, and it's oftentimes not a fair amount. It's not a reciprocal relationship where, they'll do the same for you. It's like, give me, give me, give me. And oftentimes that's a result of our own behaviors, not having boundaries, not communicating clearly, not respecting and loving ourselves enough so that we can say no when those requests come. Because if we start saying yes all the time, what happens is people start to take advantage. They don't do it knowingly. It's not like it's an intentional thing. It's just they've always come to expect things from you.
Oh yeah, I mean, I do believe that a lot of things that when it keeps happening, we kind of let it happen as well.
Absolutely.
In terms of interaction behavior, like you said, like that person keeps using you. Well, you keep saying yes, you don't have to pick up the phone, and it's easier said than done. I understand that, but it's also there's also like what's the payoff for you as the person being used in that way for your time or your resources, right? Or your energy is, maybe you feel needed, maybe there's a void, and it's like, and I say you, like I've been, I mean, I say all of us, I say not you, Melanie, or you, the listener, but like all of us. And it's like, it's like you sometimes you just have to like pull back and go, wait, why am I putting up with this? Why am I doing this? Like, this is not okay.
Absolutely. And so much of that, I think, is being able and aware enough to check in with ourselves and really understand and know how that person makes us feel. And so oftentimes I think if we check in with ourselves and we say like, man, like every time the phone rings and it's so-and-so calling, it just, my blood boils and I don't want to answer the phone, which is a really good sign that maybe you need to step away, not necessarily permanently, but maybe take a little bit of space, tell that person that you're busy, do whatever you have to do, try not to lie. But, if you have to lie in the situation to give yourself some space, then by all means, do what you got to do. But I think oftentimes if we can just be aware enough of ourselves and what our thought processes are, checking in and knowing how somebody is making you feel is incredibly important. And I think that will be the judge of where to go.
Absolutely. Do you walk away every time? Like, how do you make that decision before you walk away, are there steps beforehand that you do?
I think you have to be really self-aware of, again, how that person makes you feel. And you have to love and respect yourself enough to know when to walk away. And it's not like, there's not like a black and white answer, right? It's not like if this happens, then I'm gone. Or if this happens, then maybe I'll stay a little longer. I think it really is a personal choice. And it has to do, so many times in relationships, we run into this. And when I coach people on intimate relationships and they're struggling with, do I stay or do I go? What I often have them do, and this would work well for friendships as well, is it takes the emotion out of it, but create a scorecard. And so write down, if you were looking for a friend, what are the top 5 things or top 10 things that I would really want in my friend? Like if I wanted a good friend, maybe it's, we get to go shopping on the weekend, or we get to meet up for coffee or tea, or, when I call them and I'm feeling down, they're there for me in a moment's notice, or, it could be a number of things, like whatever your values are and whatever's important to you. And just really go down that list and then compare the person that you're thinking of against that list and see how it matches up. Some people like to put a rating or a weight to these items and then score them. This sounds kind of insensitive, but the truth of the matter is we get so caught up in the emotions that it's really hard to put something tangible against that, like something to just take your emotions out of it and say, like, I'm black, like just on paper, what does this even look like? And, it might not be that, if they get, say you've listed 5 things, and if they score really high on only one of them, it doesn't mean that you have to walk away. It just means like, okay, like maybe I need to reframe my expectations for this relationship. She's not the kind of person that I can call when I'm struggling, but she's a really fun coffee date, or, you know what I mean? And so you have to, it's again, like in your mind, I have lots of friends that I will not even, I won't call with my personal issues, but I would love to go out for a drink with, or to grab some coffee or tea with. And it's a very different relationship. And so I think our expectations, when we set expectations on friendships, I think it's great to want those close relationships. But the truth of the matter is, in all of this world, we're probably only going to have a handful of people that we look back on and think, wow, like she was a really great person in my world.
Yeah.
There's going to be lots of other people kind of surrounding those relationships, but you'll have lots of people that touched you in some way, but they may not be kind of like a soulmate friend,
Yes.
Yeah, and I think that's why you said, like, I love that you said expectations, because it very much is like the idea of the list. The way I hear this when you said it is that it's almost like managing our expectations, right? So,
Yes.
what are the other steps, like in terms of, I guess, like, how do you know? Is that how you know whether to walk away or not? Or
I think it's a helpful tool in making that choice. If, like I said before, like if somebody meets 1 out of the 5, that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to walk away. Maybe you accept the friendship for what it can provide you.
yes,
And if it's not enough, then like, well, I need more out of somebody, and that's not enough. Like, I want to be able to, if I'm going to have people in my life, I really want to be able to call them when I'm down and, have them support me. And if she's not that kind of person, and that's something that's, number 1 on your list, and it's incredibly important to you, and you don't want to talk to people at coffee that cannot support you in that way, then that's a no for you. But it might be different for you or I,
yes,
and I think it's really important, and most important, to check in with yourself. This quality of being able to be self-aware of how we're behaving around somebody, how somebody makes us feel. Are you in a friendship where you feel like you are you changing yourself when you're around them? Are you not being authentic in that relationship? Like, I have some friends that are really into health and fitness, and I had felt myself for a period of time feeling super self-conscious that, like, if I wasn't like running or doing things, like I wasn't going to fit in and I wasn't good enough for them. And so you have to look, and what I did is I flipped that, and I did a lot of work on myself to say, like, okay, like, why am I not loving this part of myself? And how can I accept that, maybe I'm not in a season where I'm running or being fit or doing the things that, like exercising and those sorts of things. Because if we start changing ourselves to be around friends, it really comes down to what's going on inside of us. And so I think there's a lot to be said about self-love, like how our friends love themselves and how we love ourselves, how we accept ourselves, and how our friends accept themselves. And once you get to a place where you can be really authentic with yourself, if you're not being authentic with yourself, you can't be authentic with your friends.
no.
And same goes for them. If they can't accept themselves and be authentic with themselves, it's going to be really hard for them to make quality friendships. Because if you're kind of lying or manipulating your way through, like, say, like I have this group of friends that likes to run and I'm not running, but I'm like, oh, like, they're going to look down on me if I'm not running. So I kind of lie and I say, like, well, yeah, like I hurt my ankle, I'm not running right now. Like, I mean, who wants to be in a relationship like that? That's no fun for anybody.
Yeah. Listening to you, I was just thinking, I think most of us, and I definitely include myself in this, have been the shitty person to someone else, like the shitty friend that they were expecting more from us and we weren't giving them what they wanted. Or maybe there's a person I call only when something's wrong. You know what I mean? I guess it's easy to feel and to react when we're on the receiving end of something we don't like, than to actually also acknowledge that sometimes we are that person. And I guess like you were saying, is to check in and be self-aware. And it's like, are we actually being authentic in every interactions, or not that you have to analyze every interaction, because otherwise you can't function, as there's no time. But it's like, but the main ones are the ones that you do a lot. Is like, actually, am I maybe that kind of friend to someone else? Am I making someone else feel this way?
Yes.
Am I saying things maybe to keep them around? Like, how do you know what I mean? Like, it's important to put ourselves in perspective too, in that sense.
Yes. And I think there's so many things we can do to, obviously in the COVID world and a lot of us being quarantined and things like that, it's really hard to connect with people. But like, even a simple text just saying like, hey, how's your week going? Like, or if they're in a relationship, how are things going with Joe? This is the simplest little things that tell somebody that you care. Yeah. And I think so often, we put so much stock in this in-person time. And I think in this world, especially, simple check-ins, because people are going through a lot, especially with mental health and addiction. Yeah. At this point, being really complicated by COVID, just simply checking in on our friends and being there for them. And, I think the behavior that we give out is mirrored back to us. So if we're being that friend to them, most likely they will be that friend to us, or they will, attempt to be that same kind of friend to us. That's what I've experienced anyway. And so what we give out comes back to us.
True. I guess unless like someone is just there to be, they're a bit more malicious and they like to use people, then they will look for that person who's being really good to them, and they'll just keep, milking it and draining you.
Yeah. And then in those cases, I think you just have to be really self-aware of what is going on and knowing your value and having the strength and the courage to walk away.
And you know what? That when you say that, when to walk away, I find that sometimes, like, to me, like, something that is like such an important question to ask myself, like if I'm in a situation like that, is to go, why am I putting up with this? And it doesn't take long for me to realize, this is why I'm doing this. And this is a pattern of mine. And there's a reason why that person's in my life. Do you know what I'm saying? It's whatever it makes you feel. And that behavior, that dynamic will mean something different to you or to me or to someone else. It's just whatever makes you, whatever it reminds you of, that is that first step of awareness, because once you see it, it's really hard to unsee it. And then if you can, whether you can then build new friendships and have that warm, fuzzy feeling, and you can just hang out all afternoon just having coffee on the terrace when we open again, those are not easy to come by. But that's why I think, like, to me, like, I really, really value them. And I do miss it, when I don't have it. Is there anything else that you want to say on the toxic friendships or codependent friendships?
Yeah, I think
without abuses, is there anything you wanted to add on that?
Yeah, I think I do want to just add one thing. So oftentimes when we are attracting people into our lives that are taking from us more than they're giving, oftentimes that could be a sign that you are codependent in that friendship. And so codependent people oftentimes need people to need them, right? Yes. That was my thing. So I was a really high achiever. At work, I was like the best worker ever. And I did all the things for everybody. And I made sure I found ways that everybody needed something from me, and I was the only one that could provide it to them. And that's not really true, but it was the path of least resistance. And so I think oftentimes if we have a lot of relationships and a lot of friendships where we're feeling that unbalance and we're starting to feel a little resentment because of it, we need to also be able to check in with ourselves and say, like, do I secretly enjoy the fact that they need me?
Yes.
What am I getting out of it? Because to be honest, in my deepest throes of codependency, that was my thing. Everybody needed me. And I created that. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so often we need to just, I can't say enough about being self-aware.
Yes.
And really being honest with yourself about what is going on. Because if you have a slew of people around you that are you feel like that are taking so much from you, and you're starting to build this resentment towards people, that's probably not their fault. That's probably something that you need to look inward and say, like, what am I doing to create this? Am I not having any boundaries?
Yes.
And if I need people to need me, we need to dive a little deeper into that with some therapy, or some coaching can help with that too. But I think if you're in that deep, I think some therapy is extremely beneficial.
I love that you said that, because those people who obviously came back to you, like at that job and asking you to do things, so they needed you, quote unquote needed you. Had you set like a boundary from the get-go, they wouldn't have carried on.
No, absolutely not.
Yeah.
It was like, what do you need? Oh, I'll do it. It's Saturday. Sure. No problem. Like, yeah. Yeah.
It's so funny because in a corporate job I was in, there was a person sat across from me, and we were almost like the opposite in terms of like the workload, how much people could just like dump on us. And I remember like the whole time I was there, now I knew, because obviously we became friendly, I knew that she hated all the workload that particular person kept giving her. And it was a very senior person. And that senior person was not used to hear the word no. Like they just assumed, they were very typical, like financial services background, very, very typical. No one says no to them. They have a lot of money and, very like cliche. And she always accepted the workload with a big smile. Like it looked so genuine. Honestly, until I became friends with her, I was like, she's so happy here. Turned out she was like literally, not sleeping at night. I mean, in such a state, it was really not good. And I remember now, I'm not in that corporate job anymore, but, we're still friends. And I met up with her and I said to her, I was like, we were talking about that. And I said to her, that same person, that senior person, I was reporting directly to them. But that senior person, they tried 3 times at the beginning to push the boundary. And because I put my foot down, they never once did it again. Like one time they asked me to do something on a Saturday that was so not an emergency. And the next time I met them, I was like, for a meeting, I was like, we need to address the word emergency and what we need to talk about what an emergency consists of. And I explained to them in very nice term, like you're doing a corporate job, but I was explaining to them how that was not an emergency and that cannot, basically I said to them that cannot happen again. If you want, my time needs to be used as an emergency, if it's an emergency, especially because I was part-time. So the minute you ask someone to do work over the weekend, if I was full-time, maybe, but I was part-time. So I was like, and I never had to do, if I worked overtime, I was paid for it as well. Whereas that other person wasn't.
Yeah. And I think so having that boundary from the outside is really important. But if you find yourself kind of like, where your friend was and feeling really resentful and becoming very anxious about it, it's really hard in that situation to work towards establishing boundaries because
it's too late. It's too late almost.
I mean, it can be done, but it's really tricky.
Yeah.
That boss, has come to expect certain behavior from her. She hasn't shown him what's appropriate and what's not appropriate. He likely disrespects her because she just takes it all on.
Thank you. Yes, exactly.
Things, to be said there. And from her perspective, it's probably incredibly intimidating to go to him now and say, I can't do that anymore because you've been doing it. So what right do you have to take it back? And so, from the outside of relationships, really understanding what our boundaries need to be, especially, work relationships, but even with friendships, like what's appropriate, like, can they just swing by whenever they want, what conversations are appropriate, like if, maybe you have some family things that you're like, that I don't want to have conversations about that. And so you have to be really cognizant from the beginning of what you're willing to do and what kind of conversations, what sort of things you want out of relationships, and then hold that boundary from the start is the easiest way.
Yeah. And I think almost is this something that you learn, right? I think the fact that I could push back is because I had been in a position a few years earlier where I did not push back. And I was, when I say fatigued, is putting it very mildly, like it was a contributor factor to having my breakdown, because I was just working constantly and just saying yes to everything. And it was just not, it does something to you, And I think once you've gone through that, you're like, no, again.
Yes.
Yeah. So, I'm not saying that like as if I've always been great at putting boundaries up at work. Definitely not. Because obviously you're always scared you're going to get fired and then you don't have a salary. And then what, That's also
Absolutely.
a fear. Yeah, that's also. So before I go on to addictions, I just wanted to quickly ask you, let's say you've come to the decision with a friendship that, this is just not good anymore. This is not okay for you anymore. It's not healthy for you. You're drained. You feel bad. You just don't want to, every time that person texts you, your stomach goes in cramps or your heart starts beating. Whatever it is, it's just not good. And you don't want to do this anymore. How do you break up a friendship?
Yeah, it's such a complicated thing because it can be such a hurtful thing if it's not done in the right way.
Yes. Yeah.
When I've shared this story a little bit over the last few weeks of when I was in high school. I was like the fourth girl in a clique of girls, and we kind of, it was just the 4 of us for the longest time. And one day they invited me into the school counselor's office, and they were all sitting there with the counselor, and they essentially said they didn't want to be my friend anymore. And the counselor was like supporting them in this like ambush is what it felt like. And it was so hurtful. And, that was probably over, I'm 39 now. So whatever that was, many years ago, like over 20 years ago. And it has stuck with me really for, and it really ruined my idea of what friends could be. I mean, I've certainly like grown and learned from that experience. And I was like, that wasn't really about me. That was, more about them than it was me. And how they handled it. It was really inappropriate. And I just kind of accept, I'm not taking the victim mentality, but I'm just saying, that was interesting. That happened to have happened.
Yes. Yes.
And so it did impact me for a long time until I was able to really look at it and say like, okay, like, I love myself, and if they don't respect me enough, and, it was this really hurtful thing. And so I think, it's so important to be open and honest, but also be kind, and be thoughtful of the other person. Like if you were the other person in this situation, even if you are feeling like, maybe they're not the best person for you, that doesn't make them a horrible person. I don't believe there's really any horrible people.
No.
And so it's really important to empathize with the other person and say like, okay, like how can I do this in a way, like if I were on the receiving end of this, what would make me feel good or what would make me feel okay about it?
Yeah.
And I think being honest, but kindly honest, we don't have to say like, well, you did X, Y, Z, you can just say like, I feel like hurt when, the only time you reach out to me is when you're having struggles and, I don't feel that same level of support from you. And, I just, whether it's, you need to take some time off, maybe like, let's just take a few months away from each other and kind of see it. I think a lot of times we can take a break from somebody and they will either grow from that and we'll grow from that. And you guys can come back together and be friends. It doesn't mean like we have to say goodbye, but if you want to say goodbye, I think you certainly can, but I think it's important to do it kindly, to not accuse people. And in that example I shared, that was the, instead of using you did X, Y, Z. So instead of using you in those sentences, when you're trying to talk to somebody about something that happened, say, I feel instead, which sounds kind of corny, and it is really, but it's really important because like you can feel the difference in the words, right?
So could you say something like, I feel hurt when you only reach out when you're single, and I don't feel that I can call you. Like you have, I feel like there's this wall between us, and that is, as much as I love you, I don't feel like this is not how I see a friendship. And unfortunately, I wanted you in my, that's too long, isn't it? But anyway, like something like that, like almost.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you feel the difference in the words and the tone of what you're saying. So if you were to say like, you never call me, like the person is going to come back at you with, like there's all these reasons why, and I think if we can come into it with, how to have our emotions in balance, so we're not super angry or upset at the moment, come in with neutral emotions and explain to them exactly where you're coming from, but do it with love and send them off with love.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, absolutely. And I think, absolutely. It's just, I guess, like sometimes you just have to,
it's really tricky,
I'm not someone who likes to end things. Like for me, people are the most important things in my life, people and time. And I think, so that's why it's a huge inner conflict for me when things like that happen, it's like, but I guess like after you've tried, trying and give it a go again. And it's like, it seems like too much work to me.
And I think
which is a shame because that's
a lot of work. Yeah. And I think so often if we, think about prioritizing ourselves, and that sounds selfish, but it's really not.
No.
But, once we prioritize ourselves and we say like, is this person like taking my energy or are they giving me energy? And if they're constantly taking and they're not filling your cup ever, it's a really big sign to you that letting them go could be very beneficial for you.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But, it's funny because I think I do also recognize things that I've done wrong. I think I can't be here and be on the moral high ground. But I think, like what you said, someone else said that to me, is like, you'll see, once you let go of relationships that are playing you like a piano, you open the space to better friendships. You open space to people who actually appreciate you. And I say that, like, I think that goes for everyone. It's like the minute you let go, it's a bit like when you have a bad marriage or a bad relationship with like, a boyfriend or girlfriend. the minute you let it go, actually, after the first initial grief, you start to fill your cup and you start to actually attract people that are a bit better for you, because what that person has shown you, the one who you, from your end, seem toxic or codependent, or just not healthy for you, the opportunity they've given you is to see actually what it is that you want in a friendship.
Absolutely.
So you actually kind of upgrade is a terrible way to say this in this context, but that's the only word I can think of, is that they actually help you upgrade your life. Like, what do you find that's important to you? How do you simplify your life?
Yeah, I think that's so true for just about all of the hard things that come through our life. Like when I lost my brother, I don't want to say that, in a heartbeat, I would take my brother back, but I have learned so much. I have found my path. Like, his death has given me purpose, and, and my sister's struggle, not easy by any means, but the same sort of thing. And I've had some really hard relationships like friendships that have been really tricky, like that experience in high school. And even though it was a horrible experience, and I often relate to it in a negative sort of way, where I was like, talking about, how much it created this sense of doubt and unworthiness in me, it also made me incredibly resilient. It gave me gifts along the way. And so all these things, like, even if, try not to feel too much disappointment or, struggle with yourself because, it wasn't good and maybe you let it go on a little too long. I think oftentimes we're learning. If we're holding on to a friendship, we're still learning. And when you're ready to let go, you will let go.
Yeah, that is so true. That is really, really true. We can actually, I think that maybe, I think now it's probably a good time to get into the, relationships or friendships with someone who has an addiction.
Yeah.
And so kind of made sense to me when you talked about how you felt that you sort of resonated more with the family around the friends, the close people around someone with addiction. Because I guess that's obviously the space that you and you live through. So is there a difference between, how to navigate it, or how much you, and sorry, I don't know, if there's a better term for this, but, to put up with it in a way?
Mm-hmm.
How long to put up with it when it's a friendship or when it's a family member? Or are the rules the same?
Yeah, I think it really depends on the relationship, because you can have a relationship with a sibling or a parent that is using, and you may not be as close to a parent or sibling as you are to a friend. And so I think it's a very individual situation to, look at. And I know with when my sister's been struggling for well over 12 years, and more recently, like in the last year, I pretty much cut off ties with her. I'm actually raising her daughter.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of history there. Right. And so, for me, I had to let go of my hopes and dreams for her in the last year. Just recently, we just brought her to a medical detox facility over the weekend. And, I was part of an intervention with her, and, I'm extremely grateful that I decided to do that. And I think it's a personal choice, and you have to know where you're at. It's not the same for everybody in my family, I will say. So there's been periods of time where I've had to throw out my hands and say, I can't take no more for my personal well-being.
Yeah.
It was sort of like everything that was happening was just kind of depleting me. And again, checking in with my energy and saying, like, how is this making me feel? Like, and granted, these things are never going to be easy, but do I have the capacity to take this on right now? It is a very tricky balance. And for whatever reason, this last weekend, I felt really compelled to give it one more shot. And I've been pretty vocal in that is my last shot.
Yes.
And so I think we have to know where we're at. And, I say, yes, this is my last shot, but it doesn't mean that something's going to happen down the road and I won't change my mind. And it's really being self-aware and checking in with yourself and knowing when enough is enough. And the only person that can really tell you that is yourself, because you're the only one who knows how that's affecting you every day in, day out. I needed to take some time to be strong for her daughter and my own kids. I'm a single mom trying to raise 3 kids. And so, for me, I knew I had to step away for a while.
Is it offensive if I say that she's really lucky to have you, because you're also looking, you're raising your niece?
Oh, no, not offensive at all.
Okay.
No,
because that's huge, because obviously, things could be so much worse for your niece right now. So I said so much worse, they could be terrible. Whereas now she's in a place where someone's actually looking after her and love her, and you're even blood related. So
yes.
Most people with addictions, their children do not have that possibility to go with family.
Yes.
So, So, okay. Yeah, no, I'm glad it was offensive, because she's, and she's really lucky that she has you. So, you were saying with, early on in the episode, you were saying about enabling. So that is something that I feel like, I don't know if that's something that, most people who know someone with addiction have this struggle of, in order to almost get along with them, you almost enabling them, because if you actually don't let them, so if there is someone that I love and I respect, and I can see the potential in that person, and they are having some sort of an addiction, or they even have like I said, a mental health attribute that makes them manipulative, because I can see the potential in them, it really hurts me, and it makes me almost angry to see them going down that road. So for me, because I respect them, in my mind, I may be wrong here, but I feel like I respect them, I then don't let them get away with shit, and it's often it's in the small things, but the problem is that by doing that, because, to have a strong framework and boundaries, it's like this battle. It feels like a battle, and it doesn't. It's not straight away that you feel that, but over time, all of a sudden, I'm like, I'm exhausted, and then you're exhausted, and I'm just not even gonna. It's too much. I'm trying to have a good time here, and this is too much of a struggle. So I'm not gonna keep pushing back over whatever it is they're trying to. I ended up actually, because I like this person, I know she's not intentionally malicious. I actually said, I don't know how to be your friend at the moment without enabling you. And at the moment, I'm not in a space where I can be there for you, because I have too much going on in my life, and I'm not personally in a good place. Mm-hmm. And she took it really well, actually. But I literally, so I don't know. Sometimes I just don't know what the right thing is to do. How do you know? Are you enabling them? Are you pushing back to? What are you supposed to do?
Yeah, I think the one question you can ask yourself if you're grappling with that question is, am I doing something for somebody that they can do for themselves? So, I mean, it sounds really simplistic, but I'm telling you, every time you think to yourself, should I do this or should I not do this? You think to yourself, so let's say your friend is expressing some interest in treatment, and you say, and let's say she doesn't have her driver's license for whatever reason, maybe it got taken away or who knows. You say, once you research the options and stuff and make the appointment, I'd be happy to drive you to your appointments. Mm-hmm. That's something she can't do for herself. You're still helping.
Yes.
And you're providing support, but you're also putting the onus on them, because one of the biggest things with people in addiction too is they need to want it. And we all know this, but it is so extremely hard when we see somebody we love struggling and we see so much for them. Right. I mean,
it literally is infuriating.
It is. Yes. It is enough to piss you off. And, it is extremely frustrating. And it's just like, if you would just do X, Y, Z, like, like you'd be free of this and you'd feel better.
But the thing is, I don't want to be that, and I'm going to say that I don't want to be, I just don't want to be that bitch either. Like, cause I then became a bitch. I'd be like, she'll tell me stories of when she's drinking and they're like frightening, honestly frightening. Like, she put herself at high risk as a woman and she knows that's triggering for me. And then all of a sudden I'm like turning around and say, I can't, like, I literally, I almost lose it. And I'm like, and that in itself is draining because I'm like, I don't want to be that person. That's not fair on her that I'm snapping like this either,
Yes.
But at the same time, I'm like, I don't want to find her like chopped up in a bin somewhere in the news. Like that's the thoughts in my head. And then she keeps saying, I'm going to walk in the park at night. I'm like, no.
Oh, right.
Over and over. And then she knows, and she keeps telling me. And so she knows she's triggering me. And I'm like, don't stay home. I don't want to stay home. Yeah, but none of us want to,
Right. Like, nobody wants to be home.
I get it's difficult, but like, just don't do that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think in those instances, we have to look at that relationship and say, am I willing to step away from this for a period of time? Because, regardless of what I say, it's not taken, or, I find that, it's again, that energy balance is shifted. And, when the phone rings and it's them, like, how does it make you feel? Those sorts of things, like those basic check-ins with you can tell you kind of what you need. And sometimes, like, just like with regular friendships, you might just need a little time to regroup yourself and get your energy back.
Yeah.
And it does not mean that you don't love that person. It doesn't mean that you, want to see them chucked up in a,
oh my God, that's my fear. That's my fear for her.
Oh, I know. Yeah. It's really scary, and I deal with this with my sister all the time because I lost my brother to suicide.
Yes.
I have, for a long time, I could not accept my sister as she was. I remember walking in my therapist's office the one day and she goes, can you just accept her as she is? And I thought, no, like, are you crazy? Like, if I just let this happen, like, she's going to hurt herself just like my brother did. And then I won't have any siblings left.
Yeah.
And it took me, and I just thought it was such an absurd question at the time. I was just like, are you kidding me? There's no way I can accept her as she is. And it took me a few weeks only, actually. But that question kept rolling through my mind, just like on a reel. And I was just like, you know what? Like, I think I would feel so much better if I just said, like, she's maybe just going to be sick for a really long time and she's got to figure it out on her own. And hopefully someday she'll get there. But like, if something happens to her, I'm going to feel like shit, right? I mean, I'm going to feel like crap.
Yeah.
But I'm going to also know that I did what I could.
Yes.
And I feel strongly that I've done what I could. And so if something happens, I'm so hopeful that she finds sobriety, lasting sobriety, and is healthy and happy and can have a relationship with her kids. But if not, it's not something that's in my control.
It's not in your control. Yeah, that's the thing. I think maybe that's one of the things that's so difficult to grasp is like, you can't actually just take them and put them in the glass box and watch them all the time. Like, first of all, you don't want to do that. You've got things to do. But it's like, they'll go crazy. They'll break the glass and hurt themselves. So it's like, I think that's the thing, isn't it? It's like, I didn't feel I was strong enough to be there for her. And also it was like a 1-year friendship. So I didn't know, she hides it quite well at the beginning, what's going on with her. And fair enough, it's no one else's business, really. You know what I'm saying? So, but it's just that I think I just wasn't strong enough to be there for her. And it was too much of a struggle. And I also just couldn't keep watching it. And it was actually also affecting me that when I would go home, I'd feel what she was feeling. Like, she had all this anxiety and there's a lot of stuff going on for her. And I was already like, touch and go a few months back. And so it was just really affecting me. I was absorbing too much. But, so I guess it's almost like knowing when are you actually, when can you, it's because it's not easy to be there for someone like that if you know well yourself, right? So how do you not enable them?
Yeah.
What does enabling really mean?
I mean, enabling is doing things to make somebody comfortable so they can continue with their habit. So If you are handing over money, most times that would be enabling.
Going for a drink if they're an alcoholic?
Absolutely, for a drink. Check, yes. Yeah. It gets a little, it's not, there's some gray lines, like, well, what if they have no food? Well, instead of giving them the cash for food, go buy the food and bring it to them. And, some people would say that you shouldn't buy them food at all. And that's just a personal call. But, food is a necessity. And unfortunately,
you got to eat.
Yeah. My sister, when we admitted her to the hospital, hadn't eaten in 3 days.
Whoa. Yeah.
Super scary. And, you have to know what you're comfortable doing, but essentially, paying their rent, calling into work sick for them, doing, very simply doing just about anything that they could do for themselves, you should not be doing.
What about listening to their stories?
And I think you can listen to that. I think that's a great way to support somebody that is struggling, because more than anything, people that are struggling with addiction are lonely. And it doesn't mean that they're alone in the sense of they have no friends or family. They're alone,
inside.
They're just lonely inside. And I don't care whose story of addiction it is, you always find some bit of loneliness, or it's definitely a loneliness. And a lot of the other thing that happens is, not being able to be their true authentic self.
Yeah.
And, in my book, there's a story of a lady that's gay, and her mom really would try to dress her up in dresses and skirts and all sorts of things. And she just wanted to wear those tube socks with the lines around the top of them. She was very tomboyish and was kind of constantly stuffing down this idea that she liked women and that she wanted to be with a woman, and constantly putting on the makeup, doing all of the things to try to please her mother. And then one day, she had such an addiction, she cracked. And she finally realized that I just need to be me, regardless of anybody else's acceptance.
Yes.
And she's in a very healthy place right now. And so, so often, if we can listen to people with our open hearts and minds without our judgments, it can go a very long way.
Yeah. When you said the thing about that loneliness, I think I don't know, I can't remember what he's called, but there's this, it's dating now, but there's this TED talk around addiction. And
Johan.
It's this young guy. Everyone in his family has an addiction of some kind, apart from him. Yep. Is that him?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Okay, I have his book right here.
Okay. Yeah. And I remember the thing that he was saying, and I was just like, wow, that's amazing. He was saying how people, now obviously I'm simplifying this, but he was saying how people with addiction, with recovery and stuff, what people are actually forgetting is that they feel disconnected. They crave connection with people. And this is why actually isolating them is obviously the worst thing you can do. One of the things, But then you said also they're not necessarily not around other people. And and that friend I was telling you about with the alcohol, one of the reasons why I actually felt this was the right thing to do, because I couldn't be there for her without enabling her and many other things, was that because she cannot be alone. She meets people every day. She will find, I don't know how she has this pool of people. She's always around. She can't be alone. So I knew that if it wasn't me, there'll be someone else.
Yeah.
So I was just one of many, many, many. But it doesn't mean that she doesn't have, there isn't something, even though she's physically around other people, she's obviously struggling a lot.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of people, if they're keeping very busy like that, that's to sort of numb their pain or not allow themselves time to think with themselves, I mean, heaven forbid sometimes that we be alone with our thoughts, right? Pretty scary. And if she's busying herself like that with friends, I'm guessing, there's some of that happening, but, which is really scary. And it's, if you have some stuff that you're really scared to explore, go see a therapist, guys. It is, there's no shame in that whatsoever.
No, absolutely not. Yeah. Especially because this is definitely your expertise, not mine. I kind of wanted to have you on because it's been a really long time since I've been around with anyone with addiction. And so I didn't really know how to handle it. this time around as an adult. So okay, so I'm going to ask you, from your book, because is it 12 women that you interview in your book?
Yeah, so I interviewed 12 women from all around the United States, and many different types of addiction. There was, some stories in there that are pretty alarming, like things that it just seems like you maybe watch it in a movie, but it doesn't seem like it could be real life.
Like what do you mean?
Like, so there's a lady in there with an alias of Freedom. So her name is Freedom in the book. And, she was in Pennsylvania in a really horrible neighborhood where, it's basically full of heroin addicts walking down the street, needles on the ground. Just, one of those communities that just is not good. And she started using heroin. Her parents, she had grown up in a house that on the outside looked really good. It looked like everything was together, but her parents had drugs on the table and were drinking every day. And she started using, I don't remember the age, but it was very young. And, by middle school had, a full-blown addiction, and it morphed into heroin use and prostitution, rape, jail, really heartbreaking things of, the things she would do to get money for drugs.
But as wrong as it can get, that's basically her story almost.
Yeah. And it's, writing the book was so powerful for me because I was going through this process of, getting my master's degree in addictions counseling. And it gave me a new level of empathy for women that are struggling. And so if you have somebody in your life that's struggling, the book is a really great resource for you because it will just open your eyes to a new perspective. And, throughout, one of the biggest takeaways from that book, I think, is that you are never, ever alone, regardless of how alone or lonely you may feel. How much you think that your family really doesn't want you around, how much you feel like you have no friends. There are so many people in this world that love you and that need you. And
that you may not have met yet as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. I would say probably there's 12 stories in that book, and I would say there's at least 6 where there's a suicide attempt. And, in that moment where somebody, tries to take their life, and the second they do whatever it is, one girl overdosed on some sleeping pills and, on purpose. And the second she realized what had happened, she knew she didn't want to die. Mm-hmm. And, and at that point it was almost too late, but thankfully, an ambulance got to her in time. And it's like that in every story almost of suicide, of a suicide attempt. It's like, the second, I leapt from the bridge, I didn't want to die, the Kevin Hines story. And
no, I don't know the Kevin Hines story. I'm going to write it down.
Yeah.
Wait, is it someone who jumped from a bridge and
yeah, so Kevin Hines jumped from the San Francisco, the Golden Gate Bridge years ago, and he actually survived the drop. Yeah. And he says that he knew the second he jumped, he didn't want to die.
Because he got that rush. I know I'm going to make light of something you can't make light of, but it's like, that's what I'm imagining, when you jump off a plane, which I never have, but when you jump off of the pool of the high one, like the one that's really high, I was so scared as a kid, but the minute you off it, you go, yeah. Maybe it's that thing, like sometimes we need that magic back. And unfortunately, obviously, that's the extreme. But don't jump off the bridge to get the magic back. But
no, don't.
It kind of maybe is that reaffirmation that life can be exciting,
Yeah, and
that's what we need.
I think we get really wrapped up in the things that don't matter. Like if we have a lot of debt and we have debt collectors calling us, and we have relationship problems, we don't have relationships with our kids. Like it seems like everything is bad. You are still alive, at the end of the day. And I think there is so much to be said for, every day can be a fresh start, and it might really suck. It's probably going to suck, like it's going to suck to deal with the debt collectors and stuff, but like that is nothing compared to, ending your life and not having a chance. Life is
or be in Raqqa in Syria when ISIS was there. You know what I'm saying? It's like that's you know what I mean. There's perspective, right? It's like I'm just saying, like, when you have debts, when you talk about debt collectors, then you have to think, well, at least I'm not in a war zone where you've got people who are selling, women for sex slave on the market.
Absolutely.
You know what I'm saying? It's like there's perspective. Not that our problems don't matter, but I'm just saying it's like it's like you said, like sometimes it's really hard to see the light when we feel so low. And saying what I've just said is not going to help you when you're feeling down. Like, I'm totally aware of that. But it may actually make you feel more depressed because you're like, oh my God, all the evil in the world. But it is hard when you have debts, and this, you feel like you have problems with your relationship. But one thing sometimes to remember is like every feeling is temporary eventually.
Absolutely.
So even when you're feeling great, that's temporary too. So enjoy it. When you're feeling low, it will get better. And at the same time, when you're feeling so low, you can't always that you don't know that you don't know it's going to get better.
You can't see it.
You can't see it. No, you can't see it.
Yeah. And so in my book, I talk about having these light moments, which is exactly what you're talking about with these high moments where you you pick up the book or you reach out to somebody for help or, you try to deal with something in your life that, isn't going quite the way you would like it to. Those are what I call light moments. And if we're in these high moments where we're feeling good and we're kind of clear-headed, taking those steps forward in those moments and then kind of riding the wave through the low ones, just ride the wave because it's going to come back up and then you're going to come up again and keep doing it, and, I can't say enough, to reach out to a therapist if you are, feeling depressed or suicidal by any means. My goodness, reach out for help.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. But, when we're in those, situations or those patterns, take advantage of those light moments, of those high moments where you're feeling like I can do this, or you're taking positive action, just one step forward every day. And I can promise you that at the end of the day, if your house gets repossessed, if you lose your car, it just does not matter. At the end of the day, we don't get to take our money to our grave or wherever we go. We all land in the same place. Each and every one of us is going to die.
Yeah.
And so it just try to have a little perspective in that way and just make it through the next day and realize that you are in complete control of your life. Only you. I think that's the best piece of advice.
Absolutely. And I think, that's actually what I was saying myself when I was feeling really, really low, in the autumn this year, summer, autumn of 2020. I was like, I just have to make it for the next few hours. Just get through the next few hours. You feel like shit. That's all I need to do. My only job is to make it till tomorrow.
Yes.
That's it. It's my only job. And then, in a few hours it's bedtime. I may fall asleep, I may not, but I'll be in bed. You know what I mean? There's no expectation. I just have to be in bed. And you just have to make till the next day.
Absolutely.
And sometimes that's all you can do, that's all you can do. Okay, Melanie, this has been wonderful. Really, really glad you came on the show for this. And you definitely gave me some food for thoughts. So now I'm going to ask you the final two questions that I ask all my guests. And the first one is, what would you tell your 18-year-old self?
Oh my goodness, that, all the things that are happening in high school just do not matter when you get older. They really don't. I had so many experiences and this episode is about friendship. And oh my goodness, the horrible friendships I had and the pain I felt for not fitting in and those sorts of things. It really when I look back and, knowing who everybody is today, it does not matter. So focus on yourself and enjoy those years.
Yes. And what stuff do you not put up with anymore?
I would say I've learned to love myself in such a way that I don't tolerate with people gossipy people or people that don't make me feel good about myself. If I have to filter myself to be around people, it's kind of my signal to get out of there.
Oh yeah, we're too old for that now.
Oh yeah. Way too old for that shit.
Yeah, too old for that shit. Yeah. Okay, so Melanie, please tell us where can people buy your book, how they can work with you, do you work online? Give us all the good stuff.
Yes, so you can find my book, Warriors in Recovery, on Amazon. It's been available since December 8th. And then my website is simply melaniemoberg.com. I have a Facebook group, so if you search in the groups for Peace Within Me, you'll find my group, and we'll try to drop a link. So I have a group program starting as well, and you can find that if you go to my website and look under programs. There's an application there to work with me, and it's a fantastic opportunity to work in a group setting along with private coaching and support. I really think that in this area, especially with codependency, relationships, and those sorts of things, I think it's really fun to bounce ideas off of other people and have a great support network.
Perfect. Thank you so much for this, Melanie. I can't wait to see, where your trajectory takes you. This has been really wonderful to have you here on the show. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
And that's our episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Please don't forget to rate, review, share it, subscribe it on iTunes, follow it on Spotify, or whichever platform you listen from. However you show love is how you can support this show. Drop me your questions or suggestions for future episodes via the website at angie-s.com, or come and find me on Instagram at Tool for This Shit Podcast. See you next week, and until then,
using health inappropriately.